All right, let's talk about what's happening in Minnesota right now because this is absolutely insane. I've been following this story closely, and I have to tell you, the more I dig into it, the worse it gets. So here's what's been going viral. I found this statement from Fox News where several Republican lawmakers in Minnesota officially called on Governor Tim Walz to resign. And their reasoning is pretty straightforward. They're saying leadership means doing the right thing even when it's difficult, which is why they're calling on the governor to resign. This isn't some minor issue we're talking about here. And then there's this other statement that's been making the rounds. I found it from Adam Livingston, and he's not holding back. He's saying Governor Tim Walz must resign immediately because we're talking about billions in taxpayer dollars lost to fraud. We're talking about fake providers, empty buildings, zero children. And this is what really gets me, years of warnings that were completely ignored. Let me be clear about something. This fraud was so obvious that journalists found it by literally just knocking on doors. Think about that for a second. We're not talking about some sophisticated operation that required years of FBI investigation to uncover. We're talking about fraud so brazen that a 23-year-old YouTuber named Nick Shirley went out there with a camera and exposed over $110 million in one day. One day. I want to react to something here. Let me play this News Nation clip for you.
But first, federal agents on the ground in Minnesota. The government says a massive investigation is underway in the state over more allegations of widespread fraud. This after a video claims child care centers that receive millions in federal funds sit empty. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says federal officers are now going door to door.
So federal agents are on the ground in Minnesota conducting a massive investigation. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says federal officers are now going door to door. And this is after a video showed child care centers that received millions in federal funds sitting completely empty.
As FBI Director Kash Patel calls it, the tip of a very large iceberg. It's the latest in a wave of widespread fraud allegations that have the state's Democratic leadership scrambling and Republicans calling for swift justice. News Nation has been following this story closely for months. Our own Rich McHugh spent time on the ground to get to the bottom of the scandal. According to prosecutors, half or more of the roughly $18 billion in federal funds that supported 14 Minnesota-run programs since 2018 may have been stolen.
Now this part is crucial. FBI Director Kash Patel is calling this the tip of a very large iceberg. And I found reporting that says half or more of roughly $18 billion in federal funds that went to Minnesota since 2018 may have been stolen. Let me say that again. $18 billion. Half of it potentially stolen.
Okay. Republican House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer told Blake Berman he's calling on whistleblowers to come forward.
Well, I applaud News Nation for doing some tremendous investigative reporting. We've got whistleblowers coming forward. We welcome more whistleblowers in more states to come forward and reach out to the House Oversight Committee.
Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz is responding to the latest claims, defending the state's response. In a moment, we'll be joined by a local reporter who is uncovering new details in this story. But first, News Nation's Joe Khalil is here, and he has the latest in the investigation and what Governor Walz is saying about it. Joe, what do you know?
Yeah, so you mentioned that his office has responded. They sent us a statement. I'm going to read it in part. It says that the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and has asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He's strengthened oversight, including specific investigations into the facilities, one of which was already closed, that we saw in that social media video. So, look, Chris, the fraud allegations are obviously not brand new. News Nation's been covering them for some time. But this new social media video focusing on these child care centers have really, I think, shed a bigger light on them. So you have J.D. Vance commenting. You've got FBI Director Kash Patel reacting to that. And the allegations is that these child care centers, some of them are receiving upwards of $1 million each in taxpayer money. And there's no evidence there are actually kids there.
Okay. So Governor Walz's office is saying he's worked for years to crack down on fraud and has asked the state legislature for more authority. But here's my problem with this response. If you've been working on this for years, why is the fraud getting worse? Why did it take a YouTuber to expose this? Where were you? I found that the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families says these facilities were inspected within the past 6 months. So state inspectors went to these places, saw them, and apparently found nothing wrong? That's either incompetence or corruption. There's really no other explanation. Let me tell you what really happened here. Nick Shirley, this 23-year-old independent journalist, went to Minnesota and visited these childcare centers. And what he found was absolutely shocking. I found that one place called the Quality Learning Center, which literally can't even spell learning correctly on their sign. They spelled it Learing. This place received $1.9 million in 2025 alone, and $4 million total. They're licensed for 99 children. And when Nick showed up, nobody there. Empty building. Another place called Future Leaders Early Learning Center, licensed for 90 children, received $6.67 million over 2 years. Completely empty when he visited. Mako and Mini Child Care Centers received $4.6 million over 3 years for a combined 120 children. Also appeared to be empty. And here's what makes me so angry about this. These aren't isolated incidents. I found reporting showing that over 90 people have been accused and in many cases convicted of defrauding Minnesota of hundreds of millions of dollars. The Feeding Our Future scandal alone involved $250 million stolen from programs meant to feed children during the pandemic. Now let me show you another clip because I want you to hear what Nick Shirley himself said when he was confronted about his reporting.
Governor Tim Walz is saying that you and others that are out there trying to expose this, you're doing it because you're white supremacists. What is your response to him?
Yeah, Tim wants votes. There are entire apartment complexes where white people have been pushed out of these apartment complexes because Somalians have taken over and they're inside of these towns like Minneapolis where they can go get votes from these people. And if you have 100,000 people that will vote for you because you're going to enable and let this stuff happen, and because you're going to call a white person racist for calling out facts, this is what's going to happen to a state like Minnesota. Minnesotans, they say Minnesota nice, but they are very upset. And I totally understand why they're upset, because they don't have a governor who's actually working for them. He's actually working against them.
So the Fox News host asks Nick about Tim Walz saying that people exposing this fraud are white supremacists. And Nick's response is pretty direct. He's pointing out that Tim Walz wants votes. And there are entire apartment complexes where this is happening. He's saying if you have 100,000 people who will vote for you because you're going to enable this stuff to happen, that's what you're going to do. And you know what? Look at the facts here. I found that 82 of the 92 defendants in these fraud schemes are Somali Americans. That's not me being racist. That's just the data from the U.S. Attorney's Office for Minnesota. And when anyone tries to talk about this, they get called racist or Islamophobic. But let me be very clear. Fraud is fraud. I don't care what your ethnicity is. If you're stealing taxpayer money, you need to be prosecuted. Period. What's particularly infuriating is how Tim Walz responded to all of this. I found that he posted on social media bragging about how Minnesota is number 8 for safety, number 5 state to live in. He's literally trying to brag about Minnesota while billions of dollars are being stolen under his watch. And then there's this gem from the 2024 VP debate. During his debate with J.D. Vance, Tim Walz bragged about making it easier for people to get into the childcare business in Minnesota. Well, congratulations, Governor. You made it so easy that fraudsters were able to set up fake daycares and steal millions. Let me tell you what's happening on the federal level now. The FBI has surged personnel to Minnesota. The Department of Homeland Security is conducting a massive investigation. ICE is involved. The Small Business Administration has paused over $5.5 million in federal funding to Minnesota. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced that the House Oversight Committee has expanded its investigation. Representative Tom Emmer from Minnesota said what Walz refused to address for 7 years, Nick Shirley uncovered in one day. The fraud in Minnesota is so brazen and so vast that it's impossible Walz's administration didn't know about it. And that's the key question. Did they know? Because if they didn't know, that's criminal incompetence. And if they did know and did nothing, that's even worse. Either way, Tim Walz needs to be held accountable. Here's what really concerns me. No one has lost their job over this. Not one single state commissioner has been fired. No one in the Walz administration has faced any consequences whatsoever. How is that acceptable? I found reporting that 5 Republican state legislators released a joint statement calling for Walz to resign. They cited the Minnesota Constitution, which lists serious malfeasance or nonfeasance in the performance of official duties as grounds for recalling executive officers. When a governor watches a crisis spiral out of control and does nothing to stop it, That is nonfeasance. The governor had a duty to oversee his administration and protect these programs. He failed, and I completely agree with them. This isn't about politics. This is about accountability. This is about the fact that billions of dollars in taxpayer money has been stolen, and the person in charge just shrugs and says he's working on it. And Governor Walz has the audacity to suggest that people investigating this fraud are white supremacists? That's disgusting. That's using identity politics to shield criminals from accountability. And it needs to stop. Look at what's happening here. You have a governor who presided over billions in fraud. He either didn't know about it, which makes him incompetent, or he did know about it and did nothing, which makes him complicit. And now that it's been exposed, instead of taking responsibility, he's accusing his critics of racism. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. I found that federal prosecutors said it's possible as much as half or more of $18 billion paid through Medicaid waiver programs could be fraudulent. Let me put that in perspective. Minnesota's entire state budget is about $72 billion for a 2-year cycle. We're talking about fraud that could be more than 10% of the state's total budget. And Tim Walz wants to just move on like nothing happened? No. Absolutely not. The people in Minnesota deserve better. They deserve a governor who will protect their tax dollars. They deserve a government that will crack down on fraud regardless of who's committing it. They deserve accountability. Let me wrap this up with a few final thoughts. First, credit to Nick Shirley. This 23-year-old did what the entire mainstream media refused to do. He went to Minnesota, knocked on doors, documented what he found, and exposed a massive fraud scheme. That's real journalism. Second, don't let anyone accuse you of racism for wanting to stop fraud. Fraud is fraud. Stealing taxpayer money is wrong no matter who does it, and anyone who tries to use identity politics to shield criminals from prosecution is part of the problem. Third, this is why people don't trust government anymore. They work hard, they pay their taxes, and then they find out that billions of those tax dollars went to fraudsters while the people in charge did nothing. And finally, to Governor Tim Walz, resign. You failed. You allowed billions in fraud to occur on your watch. You have no credibility left. Do the right thing and step down. That's all I've got for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Walz should resign? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.